reporting on the games you love by people who love to game. The MMO Reporter Network.
You're logging into your favorite game, grinding out some gear. A couple of points added to your stats, and you have a virtual beer. Max level is pretty cool, but I'll remind you here, my friend. These games are not about the goal, it's about the journey and not the end.
You're listening to MMO Reporter, brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download at audibletrial.com/MMO Reporter. And by Doghouse Systems. Choose your weapon with Doghouse Systems.
Don't forget about your ults you need to cherish. Each and every little character you've got, no matter what level they're at. Don't forget about your ults you need.
Hello everyone and welcome to MMO Reporter episode 183. We're on holidays again this week, so this time I decided to invite a good friend of the network's, Rick Heaton, aka Sapience from Turbine, to join me. Now, Sapience has recently left Turbine for another job, which we'll talk about in this interview, so I thought it would be a really great time for us to talk about his time at Turbine, what the game has gone through, and some of the experiences that we've shared while we've been covering the game. All right, Rick, it has been quite a long time. Now, you started out with, your experience with Lord of the Rings Online was actually from the other end of things. You started as a player, didn't you?
Yeah, I did, actually. I was playing a different MMO at the time, and the beta came along, and someone pointed out, it's like, hey, I know you're a big Lord of the Rings fan. You should check this out. And I did, and I was hooked. I mean, I think if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, you can't not be hooked, pretty much right off the bat. So I played and kind of transitioned my entire guild over to Lotro, and just through happenstance, through a dev chat, you know, a conversation with patients happened, and 3 months later, I ended up being a Turbine employee. It was right at the start of Moria beta. So I came in Lotro Shadows of Angmar beta as a player, and by Moria beta, I was I was part of Team Turbine.
That's pretty cool. Now, you were also running some community sites as well, if I remember right, weren't you? Didn't you do some blogging?
I did some blogging. I did some reporting on the games industry. Had a halfway decent following. Had a really good relationship with a lot of people who were very surprised when I popped up on the other side of the fence. They were like, "Oh my gosh, hey, now we need you instead of you needing us." It was kind of different. Yeah. So yeah, I had, you know, really, geez, if you want to go all the way back, I think my first experience with anything that you could, you know, technically call a community is if you go all the way back to dial-up bulletin board systems. I think I was 13, so we're talking more than 30 years ago. Might have been 12.
Yeah.
300 baud modem. Actually, a friend of my sister's, her husband ran a local bulletin board in my hometown. Anybody out there that's from Homestead that remembers the Homestead BBS, you're old. I kind of got hooked there. It was you know, this completely alien but very cool concept of you called this computer and you could leave a message and someone would come along behind and read it and respond to it. You could call back in an hour or sometimes, you know, even faster, and there'd be a series of replies to your message, and there'd be new messages and there'd be new conversations, and it was really cool and really exciting. And that actually evolved to the point where I thought it was going to get me killed because I thought it was so cool I wanted to start one. And when you're 12 or 13, you don't really think about the reasoning of people must call my home. So I figure, well, I can't use it during the day because people call my parents. It's their phone. It's their home. So let me do it at night. That'll be so much better if I don't start this thing and turn it on until like midnight. Yeah, this is back when phones actually were on the wall and they had really loud ringers and you could hear them, you know, across chomes. Not a good plan.
Oh, that's awesome. So you get into Lord of the Rings Online. What drew you into the game other than, yes, there's the Tolkien lore, there's the world, other than that, the IP itself, what about the game drew you into it?
Yeah, the game was just so different from what I was playing. I was actually playing Final Fantasy 11 at the time. And, that was such a hardcore game that it almost worked on a punishment and punishment system instead of punishment and reward system. It's like the better you did, the harder it would punish you for doing well. It was really bizarre. And it was kind of starting to fray a lot of nerves. We'd been playing it for 5 or 6 years. And it was just, let's find something else. And Lotro came along, and it checked all the boxes. It right. wasn't this, game that every time you turned around was going to punish you for trying. It wasn't a game where, really back then, Square Enix didn't have a concept of community. So if you had anything you wanted to say, you basically went and complained on your guild's forums, and no one cared.
Right.
Because there was no official channel to go to it. If you got really lucky, as I did a few times, and you were at E3 officially, and you got the right invites, you could talk to their guy from Japan who would come over for E3 and do community for, an hour interview session, basically.
Yeah.
Then go back to Japan. So it was very interesting because all of your frustrations very much, didn't go beyond your own guild and kin. And here was this game that, they had forums, and they had people that would talk to you, and they had devs that would talk back when you asked a question. They'd give you an answer. It really, really intrigued me. It was taking two different things that I was used to doing and going, ooh, these things can be put together.
So what was your big, as someone who was really into the game, and then you get hired by Turbine, what was your fanboy moment going into the Turbine offices for the first time? Was it meeting someone? Was it seeing something being worked on? Where did you just kind of squee on the inside when you first experienced it?
So, and he does not know this. One of the first things I asked was, who's Bearfont? Who's Jonathan? Because I really want to talk to him because he was, the forward-facing lore monkey at the time, and it's like I have so many questions. I need to talk to him. So yeah, he was kind of my first. Oh wow!
Awesome.
I can now wander to his desk anytime I want and ask questions.
And so you got hired on as a member of the community team to begin with, correct?
Mm-hmm. I was hired at the time. We had Asheron's Call, DDO, and Lotro, and I was hired specifically for Lotro.
Right. So what was it like jumping in and having to go into this this community that was already established, and that now you were meant to be one of the public faces for Turbine?
So the thing that was really, really weird is I had been fairly public during beta and during my year as a player, and had tried to do a lot of, for lack of a better term, community building things on my server. And of course, my kinship was so large at the time, having come from, a very long run in another game, that my first fear was everyone will know who I am and I can never play this game again because they will just, flood me the minute I open my mouth. Because people don't realize it, that you talk how you talk, even if you type.
Right.
And it took probably the third post before everyone in my kinship knew who I was. that became its own problem.
Oh, yeah?
That was what was really intimidating. It wasn't talking to the community or interacting with this community or anything of that nature. It was everyone is going to know exactly who I am. And Turbine has a policy that you're not supposed to ever let anyone know who you are in-game. So the first days I was there, it was a little... How do I post differently? What do I do to not be me? And I realized it doesn't matter. I'm going to be me. So let's go.
And did you get to did you keep your character from before all the way through and just a few people knew, or did you have to start all over again and get another Pew Pew Hunter to level up?
So I actually still have my characters. They're not capped. The characters I started with throughout the last 6 years. I've kind of gone over to this server and gone to that server and, played with other employees here. And, so I ended up with a bunch of characters everywhere at various stages, some capped, some not, some barely out of the starter zone. But it became increasingly difficult to play on my original server because, like I said, some people knew. Some people would raid with us from other kinships, and they knew by virtue of people in our kinship talking. So it slowly trickled out in the server, and it just became, I would log on and everyone would want to talk about, hey, what about this? Or did you know this is bugged? And going into play became just logging into different forum that I had to answer questions in. So I started playing a lot on other servers.
Yeah. Now, it's been a long time. The game has been out in development, and I personally think that community management is its own special type of challenge because you are often the forward face of the company, and you have, you're not the one coding, you're not the one making the high-level decisions, yet you are the one who is the forward face of the company a lot of the time. Would you agree that that adds to the challenge of being a community manager?
Yeah, oh, no, definitely. I mean, from a certain point of view, you carry all of the weight of all of the company's decisions, but have very, very limited impact on those decisions.
Right.
So even though, a lot of my job was to come back and say, hey, players really, really want this thing, if management had data that says, well, really they don't, just the people on the forums do, and they decided we're going to do something different, now I have to turn around and say, all right, this is what we're doing and this is what we're not doing. And most of the time, there wasn't a why associated with that. It's just tell them, and that's how it's going to be.
And would you say that Turbine was a very numbers-driven company, or sort of just very balanced as far as being driven by numbers, being driven by community? Or
I think it's a balance. I mean, I think, and I've always said, and we've always said, we look at numbers, but we also look at forum feedback and Facebook and Twitter, and it's not any one thing that dominates, and there's a reason for this. If all of our data says, I give some ridiculous example. If all of our data says cosmetic is the only thing that people want because every time we put a cosmetic out, they sell like crazy.
Yeah.
That would pretty much fly in the face of a lot of other points of input that were saying, well, music system is important, or skirmishes are important, or this is important. The trick to it is putting it all together and seeing what's what. And I think what players miss on the backside of that is they're only seeing their own focus. So if I'm big into raids, or I'm big into cosmetics, or I'm big into the music system, that's pretty much where I'm going to hang out and have my discussions. It's just human nature. I'm going to hang out with people that do the things I like the things I like, and talk about the things that we all like. So you tend to sort of start to get this kind of tunnel vision of, here's the thing that is important to me, and therefore, since everyone around me agrees with me, this must be the most important thing.
Right. And I think it was really cool when you just recently released the rough percentages of people interested in PvMP, people interested in raiding, and that's sort of stuff that's indisputable as far as the numbers itself go. It doesn't downplay the importance of that play style for those players, but it does say, hey, it's a minute percentage of the players who actively raid. Therefore, this is what we're doing, right? We had a lot of discussions about that, so it was really interesting to see that.
Yeah, and I mean that's probably the most obvious example, because in attempting to explain a decision that was made, I kind of bit off more than I should have tried to bite off by trying to explain, look, here's the reality of the situation and why this decision was made. Because, like I said, it's really hard for that group or an individual in that group, when I'm standing here with 20 of my friends, all of whom are raiders, and being told, well, that's not the majority, or that's this size of a minority, to then go, but wait, literally everyone I know does this.
Right.
Because you're not thinking that you have knowingly and willfully self-selected yourself into this group.
Yeah.
Or, of course, everyone raids because you raid with them all.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that there aren't larger groups out there.
So there is some pretty major changes with Lord of the Rings Online under your time with the company. First of all, was your promotion up to community manager. I don't if that was the official term, but you oversaw the community for Turbine.
Right.
And
actually the in-between step. So there was coming in as just a community specialist right at the beginning. And that was in September of 2008. And by January of 2009, I was actually lead community specialist, which pretty much put all of everything relating to Lotro itself in my lap from a community standpoint.
Okay, and then up to looking over all the properties that Turbine was working with.
No, it stayed pretty much on Lotro. I didn't have a lot of input in other things. Community manager was sort of a title change, so it was like a more official way of saying this is your thing. It was like accounting at that point, I think.
Right. So the game, there's a couple of major shifts from the community side of things that I saw from the other side of things, from covering the community. The first of which was I don't know which one was first, but one of them was the transition to free-to-play. Right. And it was something, I mean, we just talked about this on MMO Reporter a couple of weeks ago. In 2013, Lotro was still the number 4 top grossing game in the MMO market in the world. Right. Mm-hmm. And obviously that was a very successful change, but it had a very distinct and lasting effect on the community of the game at large, both in positive ways and in negative ways. What's one of the highlights that you saw from the community side of things of that transition?
Well, one of the highlights I saw was, when we first started doing this transition, there was a very adamant group that worked very, very hard to convince us that anyone who's coming in as a free-to-play player should be treated as some sort of, lower-class citizen. And we made a conscious effort of pointing out that if you play the game, you play the game. VIP is a subscription level. Premium probably is paid more than a VIP player. And free-to-play is kind of an unfair moniker because there are incredibly few of them that literally never pay a penny. Once you pay money, you become a premium player. So it really kind of became, and it was strange to watch, an us versus them within the community. And I can remember making a post where I tried to remind everyone, at some point, everyone here was them before they became us. And it's not going to be any different. And I think that resonated in just the right way that people kind of picked it up. There's always been that group that feel, look, I'm paying, I shouldn't, be treated the same as someone who maybe isn't or who paid less. But I think at the end of the day, the community really understood that in a free-to-play game, you don't know who's paying what. You have no idea. Yes, this person may have a sub and that person may not. But the person who doesn't might be actually paying more to play every month than you are with your sub.
Right. Did you ever worry that it was going to fracture the community beyond repair?
No, not really, because one of the great things about Lotro is it has to be, for the most part, one of the older, demographically speaking, communities out there. Not necessarily in terms of length of the game, but in terms of the demographic of the players. It skews much older than most games. People feared that free-to-play was suddenly going to attract, 12-year-olds and just, they were calling them WoW kiddies at the time, which I also thought was unfair. But in reality, what it did was it brought in people that were on fixed incomes. It brought in people who would never, ever have paid, a recurring subscription fee to play a game based on an IP they loved. And they, for the most part, weren't kids. They were still within that core demographic of Lotro players who are basically me, people in their late 30s, early to mid 40s, and older. So it didn't really bring in these kiddies, but there was a group that really felt it was going to, and it took a while to convince them that, the sky was not, in fact, falling.
Now, what would you say was we went over the most positive stuff. What would you say was the most negative experience that you had to deal with in that? Was it the us versus them?
It was definitely the us versus them. And the most negative were the people that just didn't want to hear it.
Right.
They were strictly looking at it as, I came in as a founder, or I came in as, a lifetime member, and I banked on you, and I counted on you, and I've supported you, and now you're doing this to me. It's the people that made it personal, as it always is. The people that take change personally are usually the ones that make things the most difficult. And it's hard to get them out of that mindset once they've really kind of dug in. So that was probably the most negative thing, was watching that unfold and trying to figure out, how to dig people out of that mindset. Some of them actually figured it out on their own and became great members of the community. And some of them, it was kind of like ending a bad relationship.
Yeah. I still get these moments sometimes when I'm playing where I just have a tinge to go back to where the game used to be. And then reality sets in and I think, well, you know what, the game might not still be around if they'd kept going the way it was. I don't know the financials. I'm not interested in that, but the free-to-play transition allowed the content that I'm playing now to happen. But there is a little part of me, and we've mentioned it a few times, Bill and I, that there's just that little bit. Maybe it's when that store advertisement just digs us the wrong way, or, I'm not going to talk about cosmetics dummies. I don't need to go there. But there's still that little bit. But I'm one to admit that I think the game is surviving and thriving because of that transition.
Well, I don't think there's any big secret that, a company is a company, and the point is to make money and be profitable so that you can continue to go down the road and be profitable and make money.
And pay your community managers wages.
Yes, thank you. I enjoy eating. So, I mean, look, I get it, right? But it's funny because you mentioned the cosmetic dummies. Cosmetic dummies were actually a response to the community. One of the complaints we got about the store was it doesn't feel like it fits. I'm getting jarred out of the game, to buy a dress into this window that then pops open this other thing. And I have to go, why don't you just put mannequins in like if I were to walk into a shop? Okay. And ironically, and this actually proves a very major point, that upset a lot of people.
I very much remember us talking about that in not the most positive of lights.
Yep. But the great thing is, that is actually what the community most interested in cosmetics asked for.
Wow.
That was their look. This is jarring me out of my experience. Make it fit. So we did, and they all thought it was great. But those that decided they hated the store, this was just another invasion of the store. And really it wasn't. It was an attempt to give players exactly what they were asking for.
Yeah. Well, that makes me feel a little sheepish now.
Again, it goes back to, how do you see yourself as a player? Do you consider yourself, a role player or a person who is heavily invested in the cosmetic system?
Yeah.
If you are, the store probably annoys you endlessly, and the mechanics of the mannequins is probably far more palatable, because I feel now like my character has walked into a store or has seen something on a dummy and requested a purchase from a vendor in the game, just like everything else I do.
That does make sense now. I'm sure Bill would have some great retort, but he's on holidays. So the other big shift from my perspective, and I think I probably maybe saw this more than others, and it might be getting a little bit of inside baseball here, but was the transition when Turbine was purchased by Warner Brothers. And from the community perspective, from what I could see, and I don't know how much you can talk about, you can tell me to move, whatever, but it was a distinct change in tone in communication to the community. Was that something that did come from Warner Brothers wanting to have a consistent experience across their entire series of products, or was it just as the game evolved, different people were in charge and all that sort of stuff, and it just happened to coincide with the Warner Brothers purchase?
So I think probably the easiest way to explain this is, sometimes as people, we convince ourselves that a change has led to something, whether or not it is true. So I know a lot of people convince themselves that every decision after Warner Brothers acquired Turbine was rubber stamped by someone, in some office that had no idea what they were doing. And this became the new version of, we don't like it, and we're going to blame, the new owner. And we're going to say that every change that happens now is somebody else's fault, because surely, there would never have been a business decision for business reasons before. And it's just not true. I think just people latched on to, I blame, X this week because that's who I'm going to target for whatever decision I didn't like or however I perceive.
It just felt it wasn't so much business stuff. For me, it felt like it was more of a amount of transparency or amount of communication that was occurring from Turbine to the community.
Well, it didn't really change. We've done all of our communications from our building, from the day I started until the day I left.
Yeah.
And ultimately, there was nobody, checking, outside of our building what we were saying or how we were saying. I really do think it's one of these things where people said, this has changed. Therefore, if I don't like what comes next, it must be because of this.
Of course.
People are very linear in their thinking. So, of course, all sequential events have causal relationships, which, of course, is not true.
Yeah. Now, one thing that does cause a really great time is the parties that I have been lucky enough to attend that Turbine has thrown at PAX and PAX East, including a somewhat inebriated. I'm trying. Rowan saying that there would be Ent play,
and there was.
There was Ent play, and I did manage to tape that and put that out onto the interwebs for people to see that I wasn't making this stuff up. That's a great interaction that you've always held as a company is those parties both at PAX East and PAX Prime, and really connecting with your community in that way. Those are a huge amount of work for you and for your community team to coordinate those sorts of things. What are some highlights that you have from some of those parties that made all that work worthwhile?
Just seeing the players enjoy themselves.
Recording with Chris and Bill. Sorry, I just had a cough there.
Okay. I like I was saying, it was really just watching all the people come together and enjoy themselves. And they would come together and kinships would make plans and say, hey, they're doing a party at PAX in Seattle. 4 of us are going to go. Who else is going? And before you knew it, you had 10 guys from a kinship who had never met.
Yeah.
That were now sitting at a table, having a beer, with the developers talking about, this common love of Lotro. And suddenly they were people. They weren't a screen name and they weren't, faceless voices in vent. They were people, and you learned about their families, and you learned about their likes and dislikes, and you hung out with them for a few days, and the parties really kind of served as a mixer for that, right? It was the icebreaker for a lot of people who had never met, but yet had spent years together in game without ever having met. Yeah.
No, it was always a blast. I mean, that's how I met Carrie, who's now a co-host on Lotro Reporter. And how I met a lot of people and had a great recording session with you a few years ago at PAX Prime. That was a lot of fun.
I remember that. That was a lot of fun. That was a blast.
Yeah.
Or being there and handling some of the things took so much load off of me. It was great.
It's always great to be of service. So the one thing I remember too is back at when we first started. And we started to do Lotro Reporter, Bill and I, and then we had our first big get, which I don't know if you remember, but was the gentleman who made the add-on, the first one of the few, not add-ons, the app for Lotro, Lotro Leg. What's that?
The first one was Lotro Herald, wasn't it?
Lotro Herald, yes.
Yep.
And you could pull up your character and all that sort of stuff. And then our second big get was you. And that was a huge deal. I cannot tell you how much Bill and I chatted back and forth about what we're going to do. And we're so intimidated to talk to, community manager for Lotro. Wow, we've made it. And so that's the effect that you had on our show. Just wanted to put that out there. That was a lot of nervous talking beforehand by Bill and I trying to make sure that all worked out. And you staying up late. I think I think we recorded at like 11:30 your time.
Yeah. Yep.
That was,
I remember that.
That was a lot of fun, though. My biggest memory from the game brings up the biggest emotional response for me is when that stupid ranger said that he was Aragorn. And I still cannot trust the Rangers because of that. What moment in the game elicits that same, similar amount of emotion for you?
Probably, I think, I'm trying to remember back almost 8 years to when I started playing. What was the first thing that really blew me away? I think it was walking into the Prancing Pony, and Gandalf was there. And up till then you'd sort of dealt with, nobody really.
Right.
And then you walk in, and now you're talking with Gandalf, and then you're talking with Strider, and prior to that it had been references. You knew you were there, but when they showed up, it became, okay, I'm here with them.
Right.
And then I think everybody's first really big blown away moment, unless you start in the Shire, is when you get to Rivendell. You down the hill, and you're just like, wow.
That was one of my favorite ults to take through there. I think I took a burglar through and did the Shire as a completionist and completed everything in the Shire. That was a lot of fun, too.
Wow. I went mad doing slugs in the bog.
I did every deed. I did every quest. I did everything that could be done in the Shire. And it was a really cool experience because I wasn't trying to get anywhere. I wasn't trying to rush through anything. I was just trying to do everything. So it was really cool.
We're trying to do anything. You were just trying to do everything.
That's right. And it took a lot of usually I have goals in my games and I want to get somewhere, but I didn't have to get somewhere. I just had to experience it. And I think that Lord of the Rings Online does that better than any other game I've ever been in, especially that Shire experience is just, all the other zones are great as well, but there's just something about the Shire.
Yep. And I think it would probably be fair to say that there aren't any other MMOs, at least none that I've played, and I've played, most of them. When my computer crashed and I looked at all the things I had to reinstall, I was like, yeah, no, I don't need to reinstall all of those.
Yeah.
It's stacks and stacks of boxes.
Yeah.
And they were all MMOs. But I think it's fair to say that most Lotro players have that same feeling. They come in, and whatever experience they have in another MMO, assuming they have any experience whatsoever, because a lot of Lotro players, this is their first MMO. But they all come in with that same experience of, oh my gosh, I'm here. I just want to experience being here. And that may be the Shire, or it may be, when you get to Weathertop or other iconic locations in the game, where you just go, I just want to be here. This is all I need to do right now, is whatever is here, this is what I want to do. I don't care what's 10 levels from now, or, raids or cosmetics or music. I'm on Weathertop. I just want to be here, Yeah. And I think that's unique to Lotro.
Yeah, I was also very amazed at Weathertop the first time that I was out there. Now, another thing that really has been a big part of what we do at the MMO Reporter Network and everything that we do is Extra Life. Now, you are moving on to be a part of Extra Life. Why don't you talk about that a little bit, because you'll explain it better than I will.
Sure. In fact, we're recording this on Sunday night, and tomorrow, Monday morning, is actually my first official day with Extra Life as their brand new community manager. It's actually a brand new position, and I will be their first community manager. I think anybody that's been around Lotro for more than, say, 2 years has a pretty good understanding of my involvement in Extra Life and how important it's become to me, and honestly, I think to the Lotro community itself.
Yeah, it's been a big part, and I know that a lot of people last year were playing in Lotro. We played as a network in Guild Wars 2. We had a whole bunch of people on the network and some listeners as well. We all made Asurans, and we all ran around as Mesmers from the beginning. So it was a lot of illusions and many, many characters on screen. So it was always, and of course it got very, very interesting by 3 or 4 in the morning. Which one's a character, which one's an illusion. But it's always been a lot of fun. Now, one of the things that I like about Extra Life is that the money that I raise through Extra Life goes to a hospital in my province, right nearby where I am. That's a pretty cool part of that. A lot of charities sort of decide where the money's going to go, but we have a say in that, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the most powerful things about Extra Life, and one of the things that I think makes it so unique is, it's easy to say, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to raise some money to help kids and I'm going to send it off to this charity and it's going to go off, somewhere and somebody's going to cash my check. And at some point, I hope it'll end up somewhere where it will do good. With Extra Life, you can literally just go to Extra Life and say, okay, I'm from Boston or I'm from Houston or Los Angeles or wherever. How do I, through Extra Life, help my city? How do I help my local hospital? How do I help kids in my neighborhood? And you can search the Extra Life site and find a hospital near you. And then you play for your hospital. So I play for Boston Children's. There's some folks at Turbine that live a little further south than I do. They play for Hasbro Children's, which is in Providence, Rhode Island. There's folks at Turbine that have very deep roots to their homes, and they're playing for Dayton Children's Hospital, or they're playing for Seattle, or they're playing. So even if it's not your local hospital, it might be your hometown hospital. You can say, I want to give back to my hometown community, and you can do it through Extra Life. And if someone comes along and donates $25 to you, there's no it's going off into the ether. It's going to the hospital you're playing for. And that's amazing. There are no charities I can think of other than, direct fundraising by a hospital, for example, where that's the case.
Yeah, and we were lucky enough to have Doc on Rift Reporter a few years ago when we did our first Extra Life marathon, and what an interesting story about how all this started, and how it's grown over the years from sort of people pushing stuff together to now being this phenomenon that happens every fall.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of these things where, and I think as gamers, we all knew this, but Extra Life kind of shows it to everyone else. Deep down, ignore the trolls, ignore all the my console is better than yours, and all the corpse jumping in games. When you get right down to it, gamers are very caring individuals. And when you say, hey, I know someone that needs help, watching a community rally, and I'm not saying this like the Lotro community or the Rift community, but watching the community of gamers rally, which is what really happened with Doc and Tori and Sarcastic Gamer, just watching them come up and say, yeah, we'll help, we'll fight, we'll do what we can do to help this person that we don't even know, that we've never met, but because you said this needs to get done, let's go do it.
Yeah.
And what Extra Life has done over the years is they've kind of expanded that to, everybody knows there's a need in their community. So now you get to go out there and tell your friends and your neighbors, say, hey, I'm doing something to help my community. I'm going to help the kids in my community through my local children's hospital. Be kids and not be patients.
Right. And it's really cool because I'm sure every hospital does this different, but I get an email from BC Children's Hospital, which is the one that I work for, every year, thanking for our support. And it's got information in there, and it doesn't feel like a form letter, though. It feels very heartfelt, and I've got a connection to that hospital through my family and through the things that they've done for members of my family. And I'm sure that everybody has a story, if you go out into your extended network of friends, of a children's hospital helping someone that they know. And like you said, it's about giving kids some sort of reprieve from the monotony that can be hospital life.
Right, exactly. And more importantly, it helps their parents. A lot of people don't stop and think. They think, oh, Extra Life raised $4 million in 2013, and hopefully we'll raise more. That's a lot of money, but it's a drop. Yeah. It is a drop in the bucket. When you figure, 62 kids, I think is the current estimate, go into a children's hospital for treatment every minute. This is crazy. I mean, there are kids that need treatment, and there aren't always parents that are able to pay for it. And with Boston Children's, if you come through the door, they treat your kid.
Yeah.
And that is so much weight taken off of a parent, because you've got enough to worry about. You've got your kid is in pain or has this terrible illness that, only the doctors know how to pronounce correctly.
Right.
And it's inundated with all of these things that, the day before weren't even in your realm of thought, and now you're having to deal with all of these. And the last thing you want to worry about is, and how am I going to pay for this?
Right.
Is it covered? Does my insurance do this? I don't have insurance. What do I do? And that kind of all goes away through Children's Miracle Network hospitals and Extra Life. It really kind of, it takes that worry away from the parents. And I don't know if everybody remembers being a kid, but you're a parent. You probably see it. If you and your wife are distressed, your kids know.
Yeah.
So they're in pain or they're not well, and they see you get distressed over that. And then they know something else is going on with these guys in the white coats, and that's making mommy and daddy more distressed and more upset. That's just more and more pressure on this kid. So anything that can take some of that off, it trickles back down, to the patient, to the kid being helped.
Absolutely.
It's priceless.
Yeah, absolutely. It must be a really cool experience to be able to have, what's going to pay the bills for you. And you were passionate about Lord of the Rings Online, and you were passionate about the game, the company, and that showed through everything that you did. But now you're involved in something that is so much bigger. Maybe not physically, but emotionally. You know what? It's hard to put into words. This is something that matters. This is games are fantastic. They're wonderful. They are something that I cover and that I do. But this is so much more than that.
Exactly. It's making a difference in the world. I can sit in my house all day and play a game, and I can talk to you all day about how awesome Tolkien was and how great his works are, and how wonderful it is to lead a community of people that are so invested in that IP and in the game, and we have this common bond. But at the end of the day, we're talking about a game.
Yeah.
Where now the conversation is, let's talk about taking that passion that we all have for our games and turning that into something incredibly powerful, incredibly meaningful, and saying, let's use that and let's go help kids. Let's let kids have, that afternoon in the middle of all of their treatment, in the kids' room with the child outreach people in these hospitals that really, I don't know if a lot of your readers, listeners have ever had a reason to go into a children's hospital. But like at Boston Children's, there's a room for the kids in Boston Children's that doctors aren't allowed to go in. They can't go in. This is where kids are kids. And if the doctor wants to come in, they can't talk about the treatments and use medical terms. They have to play with the kid. They have to go in there.
That's so awesome.
Playmate. And, some of that money comes from what Extra Life does. So it really is giving a kid back, even if it's for an hour, a little piece of just being a kid.
Well, you know what, Rick? You have been, with your time at Turbine, with everything that you've done with Extra Life, you have been an incredible ambassador for Extra Life and for everything that it does. I can only wish you well and picture in my mind the heights that you're going to help Extra Life reach, because with the passion that you had off the payroll, now that you're on the payroll, it's the sky's the limit. So thanks so much for coming to talk to us about all this sort of stuff, and good luck with Extra Life and everything that you're going to do there. And I can't wait to start talking to you about that sort of stuff coming up. That's going to be exciting.
Oh, I look forward to it. I'm really excited. I just, it's one thing to do it as a fundraiser and take that passion and kind of feed off of your games community and do incredible things. If people don't realize it yet, the Lotro community so far over the past 3 years to date have raised over $100,000 for Boston Children's. And that's phenomenal. But now I'm empowered to go out there and say, okay, it's not just Lotro players. Let's go find all the guys over at Tryon. Let's go find all the guys, at Bungie. Let's go talk to the community managers at Sony Online and get them to do this and go out into the communities. Yeah. And now it becomes exponential potential.
Yeah.
I'm super excited about that.
Yeah. And I think we're going to leave it at that, Rick, because I want to leave it on your words. That was fantastic.
Don't forget about your ults you need to cherish. Each and every little character you've got, no matter what level they're at. Don't forget about your ults you need to cherish. Each and every